about the cannabis VC space. Next up, we're going to have Kathryne Cooper, who's going to talk about innovation in the healthcare space. Amazing VC, also out of Los Angeles. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. I'll do the intro when we get there. All right. So hello, everyone. This is Rebel One Live. We are here with Kathryne Cooper. She's a VC out of CTIP. I'll let her talk a little bit more about what that stands for, and she focuses on healthcare, medical devices. Thank you for joining us tonight from Los Angeles. Yeah, I'll kick it off. So thanks again for making the time.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. I'm really excited to talk to the group. So my name is Kathryne Cooper. I'm director of CTIP, which stands for the West Coast Consortium for Technology and Innovation in Pediatrics. Long name, so we go by the acronym. We are a pediatric medtech accelerator centered at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and connected to 10 institutions across the West Coast, including pretty much every major children's hospital. My main focus at CTIP is I run our investment arm. I build our relationships with the global investment community, whether that's VC, angel, family offices, or strategics on behalf of our portfolio companies. I connect our founders with the right funds. I educate CTIP and the founders on investing in financial trends. And the most exciting part of my job is I get to invest directly in our portfolio companies. So we currently have a portfolio of 92 medical device companies. They're all pretty early stage. And what they have in common is they're looking at a pediatric indication. So they may be devices that will level up to the adult space, but they're looking at kids, meaning they'll affect people who are under 21. And so we see that as an unmet need, specifically in medical device and also in healthcare. Children are an underserved population. And so we're really happy to throw our money with both an impact and investment lens into these projects. CTIP is a $6.6 million fund. We're unique in the sense that we are funded by a grant from the FDA. So we are really looking at the impact of these projects on the world and on the community, and that's really important to us. So.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Can you talk a little bit more about that structure? So the grant from the FDA, so those finances go into the startup, and then what runs the organization CTIP itself?
So CTIP is also run from those funds.
Okay.
We are run by, technically it's a P50 grant from the FDA. So money comes from the FDA into the institution that holds it, in our case it's CHLA, and then that funds CTIP. Part of that is invested into portfolio companies, part of that runs our operations and everything that we do, and we're funded through 2023.
And what made, and can you share a little bit more about your journey? How did you get to be a VC investor in the medical device space?
Sure. So I like to say it seems like CTIP is the end of a very calculated story arc, but if you talked to me a couple of years ago, it may have seemed like I was doing a lot of different things, but always in the healthcare space. So I'm originally from LA, native Angelino, really happy to be here home and running CTIP here. Then I went up to Stanford for undergrad. I majored in human biology. It was very much into the sciences. I was pre-med. I came back down to LA and went to medical school at USC. I transitioned out of medical school in my third year and really felt like my talents be better used in the business of medicine and kind of working with the startup community. So I started working specifically in health tech startups in a few different roles. First, what I would describe as a super nerdy clinical study analyst, like what you would do if you just left medical school and decided to throw yourself into the business world, and then slowly moved to strategy, biz dev with a more interest in investments. Because I love school, I went back to USC and got an MBA, and then started working with CTIP. So I ended up connecting with a friend from medical school. We run CTIP together, and I bring in an area of expertise that's part clinical, but mostly business, and picked up some experiences along the way. So I like to say I started working in startups, and now I fund startups, and it's been a nice journey.
Is that something that you, from the beginning, you knew you wanted to be on the investment side, or when did that happen? That shift?
No, so that's definitely not something I saw from the beginning. I was really trying to get as many skills as I could, just in and around early stage companies, and kind of, even in the very beginning, kind of what is like a job? What do people do? That sounds like a very basic question to answer, but for me, having come from the sciences and medicine, which is a really linear path in the sense that you kind of go to medical school, you do residency, you do fellowship, and then you're a physician. It's kind of a stepwise of what you do. When you're in an early stage company, maybe 1 year you're an analyst, the next year you're a project manager because they've decided to build out a new division, and no one's there to teach you the skill set. You're Googling stuff, you're going to events, you're trying to gain knowledge in other ways. And I found that the kind of tenacity for information and just trying to absorb things really quickly worked out really well from transitioning from medicine into business. Because in the startup world, it's kind of, you don't necessarily need to be an expert, but you need to be able to source that information very quickly. And the same thing in the investment space. So I may not know every single thing about every possible medical device or new invention, but we have a network of advisors, consultants, and those who study topics really deeply that we can reach out to. So part of, I think, what connected both working in startups and then later with being an investor is that ability to just look for the answers and then source that information pretty quickly. But to answer your question, no, I wasn't thinking I was going to be an investor from the beginning.
And what caused that shift?
I want to say business schools caused that shift. So I found myself thinking, okay, I'm going to go get an MBA, and then I'm going to find out that I'm a super genius at, I don't know, marketing or insert analytics, right? I'm going to take a class and it's just going to hit me, and I'm going to be like, wow, this is great. This is totally what you should do. That clearly did not happen. But what I found myself doing was I really loved our entrepreneurship class, where we had to build out a full business idea from beginning to end, do the customer discovery interviews, do the pitches and figure that out. That was happening at the same time that I was working with CTIP and working with these founders, analyzing their pitch deck and having gone through the process myself and now giving them advice. I realized, oh, this is what I like doing. It's not that I have to be the person who's starting the company, but those skills are just as useful as an investor. And then you get this, I guess pattern recognition is a little bit of the dirty word, but in terms of early stage companies, and specifically in the device and healthcare space, a lot of their questions, concerns are similar. And so you tend to notice patterns and kind of ask or guide these founders in certain ways. Like, you build something that's the best widget, that's great, but who's going to buy it? And if you tell me just kind of a hospital, okay, but why? Is this cutting down costs? Is this making things more efficient? Is this better than the gold standard in medicine? And let's really drill down to see, in the lens of healthcare, why these things are important, because it's not the same as looking at things as a typical, I guess, business case, in the sense that, I'm going to make a waiting list and then people are going to sign up for my app. That's not the same for a device. Someone needs to use this in real life.
Yeah, can you go into that, what the nuances? Because I know from looking at right away, right, when you look at a SaaS company versus a hardware company, hardware is just tougher, right? The iteration cycles, the costs of doing that, it's slower, more expensive. I imagine in the medical device space, there's even more barriers and nuances. Can you share some of your insight into that you use to guide your founders and investment?
So for us, we're looking at a couple things. So we're looking at this, does this fulfill an unmet need? And specifically, we're looking at the pediatric population. So is this something that pediatricians, pediatric surgeons, occupational therapists, or physical therapists who may work with kids, that is not being met by current solutions? So either you're different than a current solution and you're better, or you're creating something completely new that someone hasn't thought of. So you can treat this unmet need in either way. Then we're looking at the commercializability. So is there really a pathway to get from step A to step Z? What's nice about medical device is all the companies we're looking at are going through some sort of FDA regulatory pathway. And because it's regulated, it's very stepwise, in the sense that you will fill out a 510(k) application, you will get feedback to that, you need to do some sort of clinical trials. There are steps that you need to go through. Our goal as an accelerator is to condense those steps or help our companies. You can't necessarily do the steps faster, but understand the steps you need to take and do those in the most efficient way. If on average it might take, let's say, 10 years to commercialize a device, if you can push it down to 8 by getting in touch with the right vendor or making some clinical introductions so you can now do a clinical trial at a children's hospital. That's saving you a lot in time and effort as a founder, and we can help build that network. So we want to see, does the team have an idea of what the commercial landscape looks like, or will us guiding them help them do that? We're also looking at, it does it seem feasible? We do fund a couple of moonshot products, but not often. If you're kind of playing out here in either like a super science and maybe it works great. We run an innovation competition once a year where we make direct investments in about 7 companies, and usually on average about one of those is a moonshot, where it may be unlikely to work, but we're really, if it did, it would be kind of transformational to peds. So those are some of the things that we look at when we're analyzing these companies.
That's great. Especially, it seems like a marriage of your background and your excitement, right? The fund as an accelerator, and helping these early stage founders move forward. Can you share a little bit more about where you find your founders?
So we find our founders from a variety of sources. A lot of our existing portfolio companies are great referrals to other founders, right? They're playing in the medical device space as a really early stage company, so they'll come across other folks. And a lot of them are using kind of similar vendors who may be working with more than one company. As I said, we're connected to 10 institutions on the West Coast, which makes up our consortium. So that goes from Seattle Children's Hospital to Oregon Health Science and University to Project Zygote, which is an accelerator in San Francisco, the Cedars-Sinai Accelerator here in LA, UCLA and USC are both on our grant. It's one of the few grants that both rivals, I guess, are a part of together, in addition to UCSD. So from those clinical and academic partnerships, we can pull a lot of projects. Our really early stage teams tend to be a clinician, an engineer, and a business person. It's an outlier to get a really experienced team where it's a serial entrepreneur, but they come to us as well. And then a lot of our vendors, partners, and consultants refer companies who they've been working with, who they've come across. We also do what typical investors do. I'll go to pitch events and networking events and healthcare conferences, and both for brand awareness for CTIP that we exist and also to source new companies. But it's a mix of our academic clinical partners and software girls and doing things like this.
What'd you say?
I said, and doing things like this and getting to talk to a whole new group through Over One. So
yes. So I know for those that don't know Kathryne, she is on the road and involved in everything. It's great. She's like super connected. I love it. And she's also a mentor at Backstage Capital, Quake Capital, and I'm sure there's a number of other places that I didn't mention, but I think that's how you build the network.
Yeah, we ended up funding a portfolio company that went through one of the Backstage accelerators in Detroit. Allergies is one of our portfolio companies. And we were connected to them through a couple sources, through my work with Backstage, through our work with MedTech Color, which is a nonprofit to accelerate the number of people of color in the MedTech space. They're a founding member there. It's because we kind of play in a small pool that is MedTech, you end up interacting with the same folks kind of often, and it's nice to see them through different channels. And also to make people who are creating adult devices even think of the pediatric space, because it may have been something they were open to, but they weren't necessarily sure how to address. And our accelerator is here to teach them how to do that.
Yeah, and for those that Javier, the founder of that business, can you share a little bit more about why you chose to invest and back that business?
Sure. So Allergy is fantastic. They won one of our innovation grants last year, and that was our most competitive competition to date. We had over 100 applications from 20 different states across 17 different subspecialties within pediatrics. So it was really a broad range of projects. And it's very competitive in the sense that companies fill out an initial letter of intent, then we go through those and evaluate those. We invite a select group to fill out longer semifinalist applications, and then we select the winners. So Allergy was one of those 7. They are creating an EpiPen auto-injector case that goes on the back of a phone case. So if you have allergies and you have to carry around epinephrine, which is essentially your life-saving medication, you need to have it on your person or very, very nearby at all times. So they have revamped the case itself for the epi that would go on the back of your phone case. So almost similar to how I have my credit cards here on the back of my phone, almost slim like this. You can take the epi out, inject yourself if you're having a reaction. And then it has a companion app, which we really liked as well. We're seeing this more and more in device companies as technology advances, a companion app to go with the device, and it will alert your care circle. So whoever you want to add, your partner, your teacher, your friend, your parent, in addition to calling 911. So it's really adapted carrying around epinephrine for today's society. And while any age group can have allergies, it happens very often in children. And for children who are at least teenage age and above, a lot of them have cell phones here in developed countries. So adding this to something, if you've ever seen a 13-year-old, you probably can't take their phone away from them, right? So imagine if your life-saving medication was attached to your phone and easily accessible. And then it could also update people when you were having an issue. So we picked them because we thought it was a really, really interesting solution to a problem that exists. It may be solved by epinephrine, but not necessarily in a way that integrates into people's lives of today. And also we found among teenagers specifically, they become embarrassed about their allergies and tend to not necessarily have their life-saving medication on them. So maybe they leave it in their locker, or maybe they leave it at home, or they don't take it when they're out with their friends at their movies. And what if you're allergic to peanuts and you happen to eat a peanut and you don't have it with you? So that becomes a very large risk. And we saw this as solving an unmet need as it related to that pediatric population.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that example. I wanted to dive into what you had said a moment ago, that you're government funded, but you're not only making investments, you're also giving grants. Can you speak a little bit more about how your team thinks about when they give a grant versus an investment, and making those decisions?
Sure. So I'll actually walk into the nuances. So when I say grant, it's a direct investment in terms of we don't take any equity. So that is a check that we write, you deposit in your bank account, and you use for innovation competition over the course of a year to advance your device. And that is a grant of up to $50,000. And we give those out annually with a certain budget allocated to those direct investments. Then we allocate just as much funding as we do in direct investments indirectly. So the nuance here is that we will allocate money to portfolio companies, just like a traditional investor would. However, we earmark that for certain things. So a company may have an ask. They may be looking at a regulatory consultant to help them with their 510(k) application. And they need to fund phases 1, 2, or 3 of a development. We may fund 2 phases, we may fund all 3, but the difference there is that we're funding a very specific ask in their journey to commercialization, as opposed to them applying for a grant, saying what they're going to do with the money, and then we give that to them directly to kind of execute on that plan. And that's a nuance that's dictated by our funder, the FDA, in terms of how much money can be given directly and how much can be given indirectly. All of it funds our portfolio companies, and at the end of the day gets them to the end. But what I like about the indirect mechanism, and I think this is really advantageous to early stage companies, is it really helps guide them as to what is going to fund their rate limiting step now. So that's what CTIP wants to focus on. If you're an early stage company, you could have a laundry list of 100 things you need done or funded. But what is keeping you from that next step? So rate limiting step is kind of just a science term I use if you're doing kind of an equation. What's that one thing that's going to help you jump to something else? So if that's getting through your regulatory path, so you can then go on to clinical trials or partnerships with other institutions, fantastic. That's what we want to fund, and that's what we want to focus on. If you're looking at the reimbursement strategy because you want to understand how you iterate on your device and how you should be looking at, really who is your true customer, then that's something we want to look at as well. So that allows us to apply our expertise, which is technically is free for our portfolio companies, and pair that with funding to have an outsized return, so to speak, on what may be a smaller check.
No, that's great. So when the FDA gives you the grant, you don't have any. I mean, you're investing. You're using the rigor of an investor, but that's philanthropic investment. and how do you measure impact as you invest in your portfolio companies?
So we measure impact in a couple different ways. In fact, if you looked at our FDA reporting, we measure about 50 different criteria for each company. And so these are things along the pathway that really helps define how a medical device company is moving along, right? Because if you're only saying we're helping you from concept to commercialization, and if you didn't commercialize, then you didn't do anything, that's unlikely because the timeline for commercialization is so long. So we're looking at how many patents were filed, how many people did you talk to about your marketing strategy? Where are you in the regulatory path? Are you doing clinical trials? Have you gone through some sort of animal testing? There are a laundry list of metrics that really help articulate where you are in that journey of concept to commercialization, since it's so vast in terms of years, but it does still have fairly defined steps that happen in this regular cadence or order. In addition, we look at a couple of other impact metrics because we want to see what is the business impact of CTIP on the world, and are these FDA grants really helping us move forward? The FDA specifically funded programs like CTIP because they were seeing innovation in the number of devices that were going to market with pediatric indications was pretty much flatlining. So there just wasn't that much innovation for people who were under 18. The FDA defines pediatric as technically under 21, but 18 to 21 is almost transitional adults. So people weren't making devices specifically for kids. What was happening is you're either using adult devices off-label in kids, which is legal and acceptable, but it just means it hasn't been studied directly for them. So we want to look at the business impact of CTIP with these grants and indirect funding. So we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics for our founders. So 34% of our founders are women, 20% are people of color, 11% includes veterans, LGBTQ, and our companies have raised about $70 million in intake when they come to CTIP. And since joining CTIP, collectively, they've raised a little over $40 million as well. And we're looking at a diverse pool of companies in the sense that they range from over 20 different states. So regionally, we're looking at creating jobs through these companies and creating founders who are then going to go off and tell other founders that yes, you can start a ped med device company. It may be difficult, but it's useful to society, and we're really seeing an outsized effect there as well.
Great. And for those that are looking at innovating in the space, what advice do you have for them as they're walking into the med device space? Or they might have an idea like Javier, right, and enter the space, not realize they're in the med device space, and they say, oh, okay, I'm here. What's it like the first level of advice that you give to them?
Well, I think the first level of advice is, answer the why. Why are you innovating for this solution? Why did you decide to do this? Because it's going to be a long pathway. After you have your why, look at your who. So, who is this for? Is this to better help patients? Is this to better help, clinical care? Is this to assist the hospital? In the sense of when you're looking at any kind of company, kind of who is your end user? And then I would start doing a little bit of customer discovery. And so that's asking different folks along the value chain, whether that's clinicians, patients, institutions, about your idea. I think the one mistake we may see early stage, and specifically med tech founders make early on, is that they don't want to tell other people about their idea because it's kind of secretive. I want to say tell everybody about your idea. Make a billboard and tell every single person because you don't know where the feedback is going to come from. And those people are going to help you iterate very, very early. That's going to save you a lot of time. Because the chances are someone has already thought of a similar idea as yours, but it may not have been executed as well. Yeah,
great advice for those focusing on the med tech, the medical device space and beyond. So that's great. As it relates to working with some of your portfolio right now, because you have a large portfolio of companies, what are some of the challenges they're seeing, challenges and opportunities they're seeing right now in light of COVID?
So in light of COVID-19, a lot of them are thinking of either adapting their existing solution for something specific to COVID-19 or looking at kind of new avenues that are opened up by COVID. So we have a portfolio company called AirHealth. So they make an at-home device that you blow into, and it takes a bunch of different metrics like your O2 sat, the respiratory rate, other things. And so they're seeing an increased interest in remote patient monitoring. Remote patient monitoring is something new that's starting to be covered by Medicare as of this year. But now that patients are quarantining or isolating at home, and physicians want a way to follow up with them and understand what's happening with them since they're not sick enough to go into the hospital, they're really looking at solutions that can apply remote monitoring to those patients. And so this hasn't changed their existing device, but they are seeing an increased appetite in the market for this. And then they're looking at an emergency use authorization pathway through the FDA, because the FDA is fast tracking, so to speak, medical devices that can have a specific application to the current COVID-19 pandemic. So we're definitely seeing an increased appetite for all things healthcare at this point, but we're also seeing really creative ways that our founders are applying their existing technology to the current pandemic.
That's great. Especially there's this nuance, right, where there's directly addressing people with COVID and that are in the system, and then there's a number of people that would go for regular checkups and things like that, and just don't feel safe going to
right. And you can look at things like we have a portfolio company, Limbics. They're using AR, VR to support adolescents and teenagers with depression. And so now that people are, they're doing school from home, they're at home with their families, you could see kind of a potential increased spike in, mental health issues or just needing mental health support now virtually and remotely. So tools like this become even more paramount and important. So we're seeing our founders really think creatively about how what they're doing already can complement a solution to the pandemic or to support something that's already happening. We have another portfolio company, Sanofi Labs. They make a smart stethoscope that uses AI to diagnose respiratory sounds. We were super interested in them because it's something that can be used in resource-constrained settings by non-medical professionals or clinicians. But it can also be used in like COVID-19 pandemic, for example, to reduce contact between clinicians, individuals, or those who are listening to heart sounds or doing physical exams and the patient. And that's to kind of reduce the transmission of the disease. So I think our founders are starting to think not necessarily outside of the box, but how can what I'm doing continue to help with the crisis that's happening right now?
Great. Well, Kathryne, wanted to thank you for joining us. This is Kathryne Cooper, VC at the Consortium for Technology and Innovation in Pediatrics, joining us tonight to share her insight into investing in the healthcare space. Thanks for joining us. And this was Rebel One Live. Join us every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be interviewing founders and investors, sharing our insight. So check us out at rbl1.com/live. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.